Welcome to this video. We're going to talk about a pretty bad day for virtual reality overall. Meta has announced 10% layoffs in their Reality Labs division and also targeting Horizon Worlds and all of these VR projects. But more importantly, they have closed three first party studios that had some of the very biggest games. Twisted Pixels Game Studio, who brought us Deadpool VR and many others. Sanzaru Games, who brought us Asgard's Wrath, which was or is one of the greatest VR games ever made. I mean, many people put that in their top 5, top 10 VR games. And Armature Studio, which brought us Resident Evil 4 VR, which was an amazing port and is personally one of my, it's one of my very favorite VR games. So a lot happening. What does this mean? And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about in this video. What this means overall for virtual reality enthusiasts. And at a minimum, I think what we can reasonably say is that this is a sort of meta shifting away from immersive VR devices and moving more towards augmented reality devices like Ray-Ban and Oakley glasses. I think that's what they're sort of doing here. Now, I will say that this wasn't entirely unexpected, I guess. I guess I wasn't as surprised as some other people. For the one reason I would say is that companies are not in the business of being charitable. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, Meta is not a they are not a they are a publicly held company. So basically, Mark Zuckerberg, I think last I saw, he owns maybe 15%. That might even be lower now. I think he might have sold off some more shares. So the reality here is that he is under a lot of pressure and has been under a lot of pressure from investment firms, that people that own large stakes in Meta, to basically focus on ROI, which is, if you guys aren't aware, that means return on investment. And that simply hasn't been there for VR. Let's be perfectly honest here. That has not been here for a while. They've invested billions and it just hasn't come back. Now, I'm not going to be one of these people that sits here and bashes Meta. You know, they've done a lot for VR. Let's not kid ourselves, especially for standalone headsets. They've really pushed the medium, but it's clear that that's not going to be their focus completely. Now, I'm not going to be like some people have said, well, this is the death of VR. No, VR is an established medium now. It has a very hardcore following and is gaining followers slowly at a slow pace. But how this is going to work out with AR and XR going forward will be interesting. But I certainly don't think it's going away. But I do think that what's happening here is Meta, and definitely Zuckerberg, was just under pressure from large mutual funds to start turning, or at least make this revenue neutral, and shift some resources. And again, it's not necessarily about revenue neutral. They're also going to be shifting resources into AR, which has been or has shown huge potential to be to be very profitable, especially with the sales of the Ray-Ban glasses, which are selling very, very well, if you believe the reports that are coming out there. So, but I also have to think that Meta is not just going to destroy an ecosystem which they've spent half a decade or even more building this large ecosystem of VR games. It's easy, or let me put it to you this way: it's hard to build an ecosystem, but it's easy to destroy that. So what does this mean overall? Well, Meta's just getting out of the gaming business, at least developing the games. They are not going to develop AAA games anymore. They're not going to finance them. And I don't know the sales numbers offhand, but I believe only a few of the games were actually profitable. Beat Saber being one of those, and that studio, by the way, has not been closed down as far as I know. And also, to a lesser extent, Supernatural. So those are some games that have made money, but the rest of them really haven't. So that's sort of what's happening here. Meta, as far as we know, the Meta Quest 4 is still on. And so we haven't heard any news, and they would be crazy not to produce again a console. Why would they do that when they have a large ecosystem? So I think they'd be crazy, to just let the whole thing fall apart. And I don't think that's happening here. Probably, if I had to guess, and this is just a guess, we don't have any announcements, but I would think that they're probably going to put an emphasis on third-party developers to sort of produce the games. I think that's what they're probably going to do. And there's still a lot of exciting games coming out. It just means Meta is not going to be financing those games, and it's going to fall on smaller studios that will remain independent. So independent studios, and certainly you'll see, and that doesn't mean, by the way, that these will be bad games. Some of the best games are independent games from independent studios. So indie games will drive this, and also I have to imagine, if they're smart, I would think they would make agreements with some of these modders and some of these third-party studios to get some of these things available on the Meta Store now. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to de-emphasize Horizon. That's just been a shit show from the beginning, and really fell almost flat on its face from the moment it was announced. So in that regard, I think it can only be a good thing. And of course, the 800-pound gorilla out there, of course, is Steam, the Steam Deck, and of course, Valve's upcoming headset. So these are going to be some of the I think that's going to be the 800-pound gorilla. And I do believe that, and we'll have to see, maybe there'll be some sort of collaboration. I tend to doubt it, but I think really what Mark Zuckerberg and Meta should focus on is trying to make sure that third-party developers stay involved with this ecosystem. And I think that's the one risk. Are they going to be as interested in producing games? Now, if they know an Oculus Quest 4 is coming out and there's a future, I don't think that's going to be a problem. And we see no indication that that's going to happen. There's been no announcements that they're canceling that. The rumors are it's going to be out in 2027 or 2028. So once again, we'll see what happens, but I can reasonably say very confidently that VR is not dead. It will continue on. It has too much of a following, and other developers will fill in the gaps. Thanks for watching and listening.